From Washington, the Mclaughlin Group, the American original. For over 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Geico, committed to providing service to its auto insurance customers for over 70 years. More information on auto insurance at geico.com or 1-800-947-AUTO, any time of the day or night.
Investing takes perspective. It comes from navigating up and down markets for 60 years, spotting opportunities at home and abroad. Global investing from Franklin Templeton Investments. Gain from our perspective.
If. For such a small word, it packs a wallop. If I live to 100, if Social Security isn't enough, if my heart gets broken, if she says yes. We believe IF should never hold you back. IF should be managed with a plan that builds on what you already have. Together, we can create a personal safety net, a launching pad for all those brilliant ifs in the middle of life. You can call on our expertise and get guarantees for the if in life. After all, we're MetLife.
Issue 1, database data abuse.
Whatever are the motives in disseminating these documents, it is clear that releasing them poses real risks to real people, and often to the very people who have dedicated their own lives to protecting others.
The 220 documents that the Secretary of State refers to were released by WikiLeaks this past Sunday. It was the first batch of more than 250,000 documents yet to come. WikiLeaks is, of course, a website, wikileaks.org. The stated mission of wikileaks.org is to expose the inner workings of governments and corporations and to promote transparency generally. WikiLeaks does not believe in government secrecy under any circumstance. Structurally, WikiLeaks is made up of many decentralized groups in scattered locations that collaborate on projects. The recent document dump reveals sensitive U.S. diplomatic correspondence. Many of the documents discuss strategy in the war on terror. This includes backroom deals between U.S. diplomats and foreign diplomats, even leaders. Other documents reveal uncomplimentary, or some say offensive, comments about certain heads of state. The documents also expose precarious situations the U.S. faces in political hotspots, such as Iran, North Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan. Some say the leaks have the potential for great diplomatic fallout, bad or good. German newspaper Der Spiegel calls the leaks, quote, a political meltdown for U.S. foreign policy, unquote. Question, what is the most shocking aspect of these disclosures, Pat?
Oh, John, this is a Pearl Harbor of American diplomacy. You've destroyed the utility of an awful lot of American diplomats. You've damaged severely relations with Putin's Russia, with the Turks especially, with Argentina and other countries. You've injured the credibility of the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who comes off as paranoid, asking her own diplomats to grab, count records of friendly diplomats. But the worst things, John, I think, are the revelation that a number of Arab leaders and others, including Harari, the president or prime minister of Lebanon, whose father was assassinated by Hezbollah, which is an agent of Iran, or allegedly assassinated. He has said you've got to go to war against Iran. He is now a direct target, in my judgment, for potential assassination by Hezbollah, which is right in the cabinet with him. John, this is the only good news out of this is this character, Assange, is now in the same crosshairs that he has put thousands of our sources and dozens of our diplomats.
Eleanor, is Pat overstating it?
He's way overstating it. This isn't a good thing from the point of view of American diplomacy, because it does constrain diplomats going forward in their candor as they describe situations and other people. But this does lift the curtain on some of the dealings. And I must say, in this particular administration, there's not much of a gap between what they say publicly and how they're dealing privately. The Pentagon Papers, of course, came out about the Nixon era and the LBJ era, and they were pretty shocking. And I think some of this does go back to the Bush era. But I don't think there are really anything here that endangers national security. It's mostly an embarrassment.
Doesn't the public really kind of expect diplomats to behave this way?
The American public expects diplomats to do and say one thing in public and do and say completely different things in private.
So he's overstating it.
No, look, I think it does endanger American lives. I think it does put at risk those who are around the world trying to cooperate with the United States to advance our interests around the world. But in terms of substance, there really wasn't anything that was all that shocking in this. This is kind of much ado about the obvious. Like it's a big shock that Saudi Arabia is funding al-Qaeda, or that the Chinese are facilitating the North Koreans and helping Iran with its nuclear arsenal. None of this comes as a shock, but I think what is shocking to the American people is not the anti-American anarchist Julian Assange, and I do believe his act was an act of sabotage against the United States. I think what comes as the biggest shock is the fact that the original leaker was an Army private first class, Bradley Manning. This is somebody within our own intelligence apparatus in the United States Army. He's the real, not to excuse what Assange did, but Manning is the ultimate villain in this case, and I think that's what comes as the biggest shock.
James Warren, welcome. I like the shirt, but this is not Halloween.
I got it online 2 for 1 from the Tony Blankley Memorial Collection.
You're going to work on the suits now.
Thank you. Yeah.
What's the answer to this question?
The answer to the question
is he overstating it?
Pat way overstating it. This is less Pearl Harbor, more Mary Poppins. It's an interesting window onto some of our toughest, biggest decisions impacting Americans, including over 2 wars. And I think, as Eleanor suggests, that it's pretty darn benign. When one sees how our diplomats have been acting, I think they come off as pretty smart, pretty thoughtful. Now, as far as the bigger surprises, I would say the utter duplicity of many of the Arab nations who tell us privately about bomb Iran, but don't have the nerve to tell their own people. And then also, I find fascinating the utter ignorance about that wacky country of North Korea. Even the Chinese don't really understand what's going on. Yeah. We don't know what's going on. We don't know about their plutonium enrichment. The amount of ignorance that's underscored is amazing.
The WikiLeaks reveals that China is quite unhappy with North Korea.
Well, there's a lot of phoniness in there, but John, this is what's astonishing. Look at where we had Valerie Plame, an analyst named in the CIA. You have all the grand juries and panel. Look, John, take the king of Saudi Arabia is calling for a war on Iran, okay? We know they maybe were pushing for it. If there's a war in Iran, what do you think's going to happen to these guys in the Arab world?
Okay, let's move it on. Hold on, Eleanor. I'll go right back to you. Okay, WikiLeaks leaker. The leaker of WikiLeaks is said to be military intelligence specialist Private Bradley Manning. He is in federal custody and is charged with distributing classified information to a third party. But the U.S. government wants to arrest the webmaster himself, WikiLeaks director Julian Assange, a native and citizen of Australia. But the case against Assange is difficult to make.
As surprising as it may seem, when it comes to the website, there is no federal law that explicitly covers something like this.
It is not clear what law, if any, WikiLeaks has broken. Espionage laws against spying, have never been used to incriminate a publisher. Federal prosecutors are arguing that Assange is protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Prosecutors are looking to present him not as a publisher, but as a third party. This may shore up the legal case against him. Question: can Assange be prosecuted under the 1917 Espionage Act? Eleanor Cliff.
Well, the courts have significantly narrowed that particular act, and I think it would be very difficult to prosecute him. And I somehow don't think they're going to spend the effort to go after him, because he's not the real problem. There could be other people like him if this material is so easily accessed. I think that's what we have to get used to. But I want to, Pat mentioned Valerie Plame. I'm not sure whether you were trying to say there's an equivalence here.
What I'm saying is
Valerie Plame was dealing with assets around the world.
What were you trying to say?
Operative, and people's lives
John,
were put at risk.
what I'm trying to say is one analyst was named, okay? We now have 250,000 documents, thousands of secret documents, some for non-foreign distribution, and you tell me one guy, Bradley Manning, with one little computer, got all these out of one area and leaked those. What is going on? Something is drastically wrong in the Pentagon and in the security apparatus of the United States.
It's called the computer age, and we haven't gotten a handle on it yet.
Different issue. Too many people have access to that stuff. Problem of the internet world. I absolutely agree, but this ain't a Valerie Plame situation. And again,
Who's Valerie Plame?
Oh, come on, Valerie,
We don't want to
playing with
relitigate this.
Don't relitigate.
Well,
Just
they'll see
identify
Fair
her.
Game. Fair Game, the movie. They'll learn all about Valerie
Former
Plame.
CIA official who was outed during, the illegal conflagration, which involves Scooter Libby case, and
Well, the husband being whom?
is now
Joe Wilson.
Joe Wilson, both memorialized in a Hollywood
Gee,
movie. But as far as Mr.
Wilson
Assange,
was a member of the CIA.
as far as Mr. Assange, there's no way, not a former government official, not a U.S. citizen. You're not going to get anything done with him. And again, despite what Pat says, I think ultimately this is a window onto some pretty thoughtful diplomacy by most of the American
You
officials.
have Republicans and Democrats, including Dianne Feinstein, who is the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, calling for Assange to be prosecuted under the Espionage Act. I think is probably unlikely. In fact, the Attorney General Eric Holder this week gave kind of a vague assurance that there would be a prosecution, but it looks unlikely. The problem here in the internet age is that Julian Assange didn't do this by himself. So even if you lock him up, he's got countless people working for him. They will find another Assange to do it. Even if they lock down WikiLeaks, another website will pop up.
Which is worse, that these were documents leaked, or that our own government made it so easy to leak them by bundling them into a computer database that was accessible to thousands of government employees?
The incompetence of the United States government in securing its national security secrets is appalling. If this came out of the Pentagon, are all our war plans and military plans easily accessible as well?
The bundling is the result of 9/11 and the feeling that all the information was in silos and people weren't sharing. Now they've shared, and maybe they've overshared, but I don't think this is incompetence. This is, again, the hurdles of the new age that we're living in.
Well, the biggest scandal, again, is that an Army private first class would have access to this kind of level of classified information, and enough that he could download it on a Lady Gaga CD while pretending to listen to the CD and then pass it off to WikiLeaks is an outrage.
Lady Gaga finally makes it into this discussion. Good to see. The easy access to this information is unfortunate, but the substance of this information is fine. Good, it's out there, and I think in many ways it shows that the Obama folks have been doing a pretty good job. There's nothing in here, you guys, about secret renditions, about secret prisons, about torture. It's a lot of Foreign Service guys basically doing in private what the Obama administration says they want to do in public.
It's clear what the government has to do, the federal government, and that is compartmentalize this information. Don't band it together, making it an easy theft. Issue 2, Obama visits Afghanistan.
Who are the police? They are illiterate villagers, many of them users of drugs, who come in. They have a 6-week training course. Now, how can you teach somebody to read and write, to be a policeman, to defend themselves in 6 weeks? It just isn't possible.
It's not only Hamid Karzai's inner circle that is corrupt. It's also his regime. Case in point, the Afghan police force. Beyond that, it has metastasized like cancer. This Monday, an Afghan police officer shot and killed 6 American troops. The killer was putatively a stand-in for al-Qaeda. It is said to be the worst single-day attack in the history of U.S. involvement in Afghanistan. Question, is Afghanistan Obama's Vietnam? Monica.
Well, Afghanistan is now our longest running conflict after Vietnam. And Obama, when he announced the surge last year, he also simultaneously announced the withdrawal, which a lot of military and political strategists thought was a huge mistake because it signals to the enemy that the United States is not fully committed to Afghanistan. Now the timetable is shifting. You have the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, and even Obama now starting to say that it's more like 2014 rather than July of next year when we'll really start to begin a drawdown. I think that's actually optimistic. Now that President Obama is fully committed to Afghanistan, he's invested in it with the troop surge, I think David Petraeus, the general in charge there, is going to make it both politically and militarily very difficult for the commander-in-chief to begin withdrawing according to his original timeline.
Well, the 2011 date was always a kind of a sliding fake date. They may send home, 6 troops in a truck or something. I think he will keep the promise, the letter of the promise. But 2014 is the date that NATO agrees on, and that is a real date. That is a real date.
All through 2012, all through 2013, and Petraeus is saying we will begin the exit at
John,
the end of 2014.
Let me tell you something.
What is that?
That's ridiculous.
Okay, the outsider, insider on Iran, Afghanistan, Vladimir Putin. The Prime Minister of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, appeared last Wednesday night on Larry King Live.
The former USSR spent 9 years fighting in Afghanistan. Do you think the United States will do any better in Afghanistan?
I would think that the international coalition in Afghanistan today is carrying out an important and positive mission.
But Russia's commitment does not mean combat forces.
We cannot and shall not be present there militarily ourselves, but we've been rendering assistance both to the American partners and other partners of the international coalition in Afghanistan in various ways and means.
What kind of assistance?
We have agreed to ensure transit, and we've been doing that, including not only by air, but also by surface.
Russia had 80,000 forces on the ground over the course of its 9 years in Afghanistan. What's the strategic yield of that data for today?
We've been relating important, pertinent information, including we have got it through our special services. We count on the fact that this effort will bear positive fruit.
Question: why are the Russians cooperating in Afghanistan, James Warren?
Well, because they know that the trouble that can, stem from that in regions that are much more important to them, and it's as simple as that. They don't want, terrorism to be heading off to places like the Caucasus.
John, it's the North Caucasus is the problem.
What's the North Caucasus?
Dagestan, Ingushetia, Chechnya, all in the North Caucasus, which is southern Russia right now. They've got wars going on, assassinations, murders. If the United States fails in Afghanistan, then that the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda, they start moving north towards Russia. And the Russians are saying, when you Americans bail on us, they're coming to us, so we'll help you out, overland, everything. They're even supporting the American bases.
I want to ask you a question, may I?
Okay.
I want to know why the president went over there for a few hours to talk presumably to Karzai.
Because this is the month where he's reassessing his policy. He already spent an hour with Karzai a couple of weeks ago in Europe, so I don't think it's all about Karzai.
Karzai says the United States has been over here for 10 years and they've accomplished nothing.
It's about WikiLeaks.
I'm going to talk to the Taliban.
It's WikiLeaks.
It's WikiLeaks too, which is,
what they did to Karzai.
It's WikiLeaks also, which is why the Russians are cooperating, because if you read those cables, this administration has been pretty deft in its dealings with Russia, which is why we need to pass the START II treaty, because it's another element of goodwill in that relationship.
Work your point into this exit question. On a quagmire scale, 0 to 10. 0 meaning no quagmire, whatever. 10 meaning a total and complete quagmire. How big is Obama's Afghan quagmire? 0 to 10.
It's about a 9, John.
A 9?
I think we're going to have to get out of there, and I think we're going to lose the war. And Obama is over there because Karzai was completely trashed in the WikiLeaks thing. And my guess is if Karzai is looking to cut a deal
with
the
What did WikiLeaks say about Karzai?
It said the diplomats we got over there said the guy was crooked and paranoid.
Yeah, but the Vice President Biden went over and reamed him out 2 years ago, and there have been all sorts of news articles about the fact that he's unbalanced. So this is hardly news. I'd put on the scale of 1 to 10, I'd say it's hovering around a 4.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's about a 6 or 7, could be tilting into an 8. Look, the reason that the United States is there is twofold. One, because Al-Qaeda and the Taliban used that as a base of operations to launch 9/11, and we don't want to see them using that territory again to launch terrorist attacks against us or our allies. And number 2, which we haven't discussed,
that's not why
is
the Russians
Pakistan. No, we're talking about us and our commitment to Afghanistan. And it's because of Pakistan, John, because that is an increasingly unstable state with nuclear weapons.
A consensus consensus of the American...
a serious fundamentalist problem.
Consensus of the American people want us out of there.
The answer, Eleanor is right. The answer is for, and it's not Vietnam. We're not being lied to. We're not going to escalate the amount of troops we have. And if we have any notion of ferreting out all that corruption, that surely is a fool's errand. As the cables make clear, there's one guy who's caught going to the United Arab Emirates with $52 million in cash.
It's at least a 7 and climbing. Issue 3, the moment of truth.
Our goal in this whole process has been really simple, and it's basically been to start an adult conversation here in Washington about the dangers of this debt and the deficits we are running.
We will listen now in the next few days to the same old crap I've been dealing with in all my public life: emotion, fear, guilt, and racism. They're going to rip this thing to shreds and do it with zeal.
The Presidential Commission's report is titled The Moment of Truth. And for Washington, it's existentially the moment of truth. Co-chairs of the 10-month-old commission, Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles, released their 59-page report Wednesday. It promises nearly $4 trillion in deficit reductions, savings, for the U.S. in the next 9 years through 2020. Question, the final vote of the Debt Commission on Friday was 11 yay, 7 nay. What signal does this failure to win support send? Eleanor?
Well, they needed 14 to go ahead and present it to Congress. They got 11, but that's 60% of the 18, and that's far better than anyone dreamed they would. They got conservative senators like Tom Coburn, Senator Crapo, liberal like Senator Durbin. This is the beginning of a serious debate. I think the president will incorporate some of this in his budget. The Republicans will incorporate some of it. I think people are finally getting serious.
The very fact that you only got 11 votes tells you that on the Republican side, they're going to fight any taxes. The Democrats are going to fight any social spending. It says we got deadlocked in Washington.
Yeah, it came out with a couple of really good ideas on tax simplification and reform, and also on taking an axe to Social Security. But its fatal flaw was not dealing with Obamacare, presuming that would go forward. And also, they started from the Obama excessive government spending baseline. Yeah. So any of the cuts that they're talking about are not particularly significant.
Will the report live on?
I think I agree with Eleanor on this. I believe it begins a real adult conversation.
It will live on. It will live on. It will live on. It will live on. Issue 4, good news, bad news. Will the U.S. economy finish out 2010 on a good note? Let's take a look at some of the numbers. Here's the good news. Item, manufacturing up for the 16th consecutive month. Item, stock market. The market soared this week. Performance was terrific. Best since July. Item, retail sales up by 5.8% thanks to Black Friday shopping. It was the biggest jump in retail sales since November 2007, 3 years ago. Okay, the not so good news. Item, unemployment up from 9.6 to 9.8%. That's 0.2 of a point jump. 15.1 million Americans are unemployed. Only 39,000 jobs added last month, November. But in the month before that, October, 172,000 jobs were added. Question, what other bad news are we facing beyond continuing high unemployment? Pat.
John, the real fear we've got is, I think, this European bank crisis, this debt crisis continues, and it moves to Portugal and Spain and Italy. If that's the case, the Eurozone collapses, and I think it leaps the Atlantic, and we're back into a financial crisis. That is number one. As for the unemployment, it may not be that bad a news for this reason. It could be folks who have given up looking for work are now coming back looking for work. I think there's general good news, John. I've been out in the country. There is generally positive news out there. It's perking.
I want to cue off that. I want to know why it jumps back to the United States from the Eurozone. Is it because the Eurozone is our biggest trading
it's because
partner? That is, they buy more of our exports than anyone.
The European Union has the world's biggest economy. So when a major domino falls, and all of this is, by the way, is contingent on Germany. Germany is almost single-handedly holding up the European continent. But getting back to the United States,
you mean the bank failure over there will spread to here? But is it not also a result of the trade component?
Yes, that's part of it. But also here in the United States, you have a lot of contradictory economic indicators. On the one hand, you've got inflation happening in food and energy prices, but you have deflation continuing in the housing sector. Unemployment That is the most politically toxic element of this entire
getting
economic
too
equation.
Pollyannish.
You have a
Hold on,
total unemployment rate of 17%.
Let's get into what's coming, and that's tax cuts.
The motion is adopted.
On Thursday, the House passed a bill extending lower and middle-class income tax cuts. The bill permits upper income tax cuts to expire, however, at the end of 2010, December 31, 4 weeks from now. Beginning January 1, 2011, incomes of $200,000 or more for singles, $250,000 for married couples, will then be subject to tax hikes if the Senate so legislates. The House vote on Thursday is not by any means the end of the process. Question, is the vote of the House Democrats largely symbolic, James?
Answer, yes. And closer to home, all due respect to England and Ireland and Portugal and all the problems there. It's Monica says, you still have 10% unemployment. You still have deflationary situation in the housing market spiraling. I can attest, having an 18-month-old who was just in the ICU at a hospital, rising healthcare costs, which are just absolutely outrageous, and people still spending, nobody's saving. And look around at the states. State of Illinois, $13 billion debt, $80 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. California's on the precipice. New Jersey's on the precipice. Texas on the precipice. Pat, all due respect to your populist wanderings around the country, I think still things are very
Wait a minute, hold on. Do you anticipate that the unemployment rate is going to continue to rise?
Yeah, I think it will rise, and I think you're also meeting some structural changes in some industries who are not going to be employing people even when things get better.
Where will it peak?
In some states, it's going to continue over 10%, and
I think we're looking at probably 10% type unemployment for the next year. And these bad numbers, I think, are shocking the Congress and the White House, as they should. And I think this president is willing to do anything he can to juice the economy.
Does Obama have a job? Does he have a jobs plan?
No. He doesn't have a jobs plan that you can put on the bumper sticker. Excuse me, I think the question was posed to me. The question was posed to me.
Go ahead.
He doesn't have a jobs plan that you can say and put on a bumper sticker.
Gasoline national tax of 15 cents a gallon. It will not pass.
Dead on arrival.
Dead on arrival.
Yes.
Will not pass.
Dead in your local showroom.
Dead on arrival. Happy Hanukkah. Bye-bye.
Geico, committed to providing service to its auto insurance customers for over 70 years. More information on auto insurance at geico.com or 1-800-947-AUTO, any time of the day or night.
There's a world of investment opportunities out there. Spotting them takes experts on the ground, assessing potential firsthand. Templeton, a pioneer in global investing for over 50 years. Gain from our perspective.